Yeah, I mean, she's supportive for sure, in some ways, but
I hear a little hesitation in the voice. Your tone changed a little bit
honestly,
there.
if left to my own demise, like I would buy everything. Just like this past week, like I've been talking to both of you about like what car is going to replace the BRZ, right? And like I was
Yeah.
set on all of these cars. Like I'm getting an RF Miata. This is amazing, right? And then it was a GR Corolla. I'm going to get that. And then it was like another car. And then I was talking to Sean about K swapping an FRS. And then now I'm looking at F80 M3s, right? So it's like here's my time, and it's like, oh, where's the proof?
Yeah.
And if someone shows you like Harry's lap timer, it's like, oh no, that's not real. That's not 10 hertz GPS.
Did you have a GPS or was it just your phone, bro?
Exactly, it's your phone. Oh, you got a
Yeah.
video, right? Yeah. Like Jason, I slept with your Garmin. When we were at Calabogie learning a new track, right? I fell asleep with it like this on me, right? Jisung came in, what's
Just
this guy doing?
learning through osmosis.
Exactly.
Just in a trance.
Exactly.
Welcome back to the Two Track Mind podcast. We have a fantastic episode for you here today. A good friend of the podcast, Jason Lee, is joining us to talk all about data analysis for track driving. Now, I know data analysis is going to be a bit of a technical topic, and we definitely are going to geek out on it. But I assure you there's going to be something in here, something in this episode for everyone. We'll go through not only the deep end of data analytics, but also what it looks like to cobble together a beginner setup so that you can start finding those extra tenths on the racetrack. Now, before we get into the show today, I want to mention two things. The first is we want to engage with you guys, the listeners. So if you have any questions or comments that you want us to engage on and answer live on the podcast, then be sure to go to our YouTube channel, find the latest episode of the Two Track Mind podcast, and just leave us a comment or a question in the comment sections at the bottom. We'll be sure to go back to these comment sections when we're recording live and have a discussion between Patrick, myself, as well as our guest. The next thing I want to mention is that if you're enjoying this content, we would greatly appreciate it if you would help us grow and spread the word of the podcast by liking, subscribing, sharing, dropping a comment. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, be sure to leave a review. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the show. You gotta set your phone a little bit further back. All we see is your forehead. Yeah.
I see my full face.
No, dude, it's just your forehead.
No
Because it's
way.
a horizontal view.
Yo, how do
Just set it a little bit further in front of you.
Yo, am I fixed? Is it better now?
Yeah, there you go.
Yo, but it says
Yeah, I see most
contain
of you
video though.
It's fine. Are you at work?
On this
Yeah,
end,
man, obviously. Yo, I'm always at work. If I'm not at the track, I'm at work. See my wife for 5 minutes every day, boom, go back to sleep for 20 minutes, back to work, back on the track.
Damn, dude.
Horrible.
Okay,
Horrible.
Give me 1 second. I'll be right back, and then we'll start.
Sure.
Like 1 minute.
Okay. This guy messages me like in the morning. He's like, "When's the podcast?" I'm like, "Dude, just look at the invite."
Dude, I didn't know if it was like not just I didn't know what platform we were using. Like what is this App Squad cast thing? You sent me a
Squad
Google Team invite.
Nah, this is much easier. Although, like we just experienced, it's giving me problems with the microphone. So we'll figure it out for the next time. Then it'll be a little bit smoother. We're only 25 minutes late. That's about what it was like for the first episode, anyway.
All right.
It looked like Patrick just woke up. He had a hat on and everything.
I didn't sleep in this time though, and I actually washed my hair, so we're good. Yeah, I definitely did just wake up on the last one.
We're good.
All right, so yeah, I mean, we can just jump right in. Welcome back to the Two Track Mind podcast. We have a really good episode planned for you. We've got our good friend Jason Lee here, and a little introduction to Jason. So he's probably like the biggest racer in the GTA tracking community.
Absolutely.
Loves to put a little bit of bling on his BMWs. But pretty accomplished driver, I have to say, right? So the past 2 years, you've been taking time attack fairly seriously. Yeah, you'll have to remind me. Last year, what class did you compete in the BMW?
So last year I started in SGTB. So I did my first event with you.
And you bounced around, right?
And then I realized, very quickly, Chris is unbeatable, right? SGTB. It was crazy, right? So after that first event, I'm like, this is impossible. So then second event, it was GP. and I jumped to SGTA
Right.
and I won the class. So I was like, I'm sticking with this. I'm not beating this Chris
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. So 2022 SGTA class winner, and then 2023, which I think is probably your strongest season to date. Very competitive GTA class, right? Taking home the championship on that one. I think that was probably the most competitive class all year round. How many cars were there? Do you recall?
I don't know, but it was a whole bunch. But just to go back on that, actually, I didn't win SGTA overall. I actually came second. The reason is
Oh,
because I did SGTB in my first event and I
yeah.
missed TMP. I was one event short of SGTA overall, but I won every event I did. I won. Yeah, the class.
Wow,
Right,
dude.
right. So you didn't show up to
Yeah,
enough events. That's
exactly.
the
But it
problem.
was it was a good
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah. And then this year you've also been doing some lucky dog, a bit of a mercenary, just trying to hunt for podiums wherever there's like a podium seat available,
That's
right?
right.
Racing with MTech, and somehow we swindled you into driving for Team Partout. Still got a few podiums there, no first places this year, but it was good having you on the team joining us for those couple of weekends.
Yeah,
You're
it
on a
was a
third
really
team
good
too,
time.
right? You're with Unity as well.
Yes, I was with Unity
He
as well.
did.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
You dropped a wheel. Was that you in the car?
No, so I finished my stint and I passed the car off to my next teammate, and within 3 laps, the wheel came off. So it's a TSX
Damn.
race car. The turn one GP, the rear right wheel, the entire hub, like everything came off. He spun around,
Yeah.
Damn.
I guess like 360 and then another half, another 180. And he ended up, I guess, kind of like, you know, where the marbles would be. So slightly offline, but kind of on the line, facing the cars that were coming. So we're thankful that the red flags were quick, and we got it sorted out. But crazy,
Yeah.
crazy, crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, this episode I'm really excited about because we're going to be talking about data analysis, and it is a topic that I would say a lot of new drivers and experienced drivers alike are very interested in, but there's not a lot of literature out there or discussion out there, and I think it's still a fairly new space when it comes to grassroots motorsports. So we'll kind of ease into the topic because I think we can get super technical super quickly, but we want to make it applicable to everyone, right? People who are just trying to get into it, and maybe they've done a few lapping days. Like, what's the best way to kind of get started? But before we get into that discussion, I do want to kind of discuss. You've actually gone through quite a bit of life changes recently. I know you recently got married. I was there to witness your little stand-up routine at the ceremony, and you guys went on your honeymoon. I'm kind of curious to hear, how that all went. Did you have a good off season? Are you feeling refreshed? And how is your wife taking to your obsessive hobby with tracking these days?
Yeah, it was good. We went to Japan and Korea, right? So I try to get away from some of the car stuff, but it's kind of impossible, right? So, we did Tokyo, we did Fukuoka, went to Korea, we did Seoul and Jeju Island. So it was a good time. But yeah, there's a lot of cool
Nice.
cars in Japan. Like I went to where like the initial D stuff happens. It was just so cool. But nice relaxing time. A lot of eating, of course, and then just sightseeing, enjoying my time with my wife. And then, so when I finished the honeymoon, it was 3.5 weeks. My wife stayed an extra
Mm.
4 weeks in Asia with her. Like she went around, visited some friends, came back. She spent 3 days back here, and then she went to Thunder Bay for 4 days, 3 nights to do some hiking with her best friend. And she went back to Asia with her parents, and she traveled like Vietnam,
Wow.
Thailand. So like people ask me like, "How's
Wow,
marriage?" I'm
dude.
like, "Oh, it's like I'm single again. Like I'm just by myself doing whatever I want, right?" So yeah, but she's back now, and it's great. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
But to answer your second question, like how supportive is she of my hobby? Yeah, I mean, she's supportive for sure, in some ways, but
I hear a little hesitation in the voice. Your tone changed a little bit
Honestly,
there.
if left to my own demise, like I would buy everything, Just like this past week, like I've been talking to both of you about like what car is going to replace the BRZ, right? And like I was
Yeah.
set on all of these cars. Like, I'm getting an RF Miata. This is amazing, right? And then there was a GR Corolla. I'm going to get that. And then it was like another car. And then I was talking to Sean about K swapping an FRS. And then now I'm looking at F80 M3s, right? So,
So
yeah.
So just to give other people context here, he was looking for a daily driver, and those were the cars that he was considering for a daily.
Yes, amazing. So you got to have fun, right? Right now, I like daily Civic. I daily a Civic, right? I have a BRZ as well. I have my M2. My wife has a Tesla, right? So yeah, I'm looking for something more fun for the road. Yeah, those are
Right.
amazing cars. Like daily drive, just drive to and from work. Have a little bit of fun. Those are great cars.
Yeah. And I guess you can't be too surprised because you guys started dating in the midst of like you already being pretty deep into this car hobby.
Actually, no, I've been with her for 7 years. So this is our eighth
Wow.
year,
Okay.
right? So I know we talked a little bit last time. Like I started at Hanson, right? And that was, I don't know how many
Right.
years ago. Jay, do you remember when our first track day was?
I want to say it was 2015.
Sure, let's say 2015. So then I had the WRX then, right? And then
Yeah.
I went through this sort of phase, the cars after, I think, that had WRX. Then I was going to be a big boy. I'm going to be professional. I got a IS 350, and I didn't track that car at all, right? But like there was something missing in my soul. So then I got a 335, a BMW 335, and that's where just the crazy
The
BMW
BMW train.
addiction, fanboy started, right? It was such a good car, manual, rear wheel drive, sick, so much fun, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I should be a little bit more. I was just kind of starting my career then. I was like, I should save some money. I got a Civic, the one that I still have, right? But that was super boring. Then I got the M2. So that time, I guess when I had like the IS to the Civic, I didn't really track. I
Yeah.
think I did like 2 Hanson days and 1 lapping day, and then there was a couple years where I stopped, but I really wanted to get back to it. So hence the M2. I guess it
You
was like
went
a
deep
better.
only in like the
Yeah.
past 3 years, right? Maybe 3-4 years was when you like really dived into all of it.
I would say, well, my first ever time attack competitive event was like that DDT day last year, right? So I guess it would be, I did maybe like half a year of lapping. Yeah, I got the M2,
Yeah.
half a year of lapping, and then I started right into time attack because Jason wanted to go, and I was like, I'll go with him, and it was a good time. He snapped his axle.
Yeah.
We had to tow him off.
Yeah, that's
We had
Yeah.
to tow him off track, right? And then after that first OTA event, it was so much fun. I wanted to keep going, to improve myself and get better and better. So that's where this, I guess, whole thing kind of snowballed, right? It's really only been 2 seasons, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like what makes you a great person to talk about this data analysis experience, because out of anyone I know as a competitor, I think you're definitely in the deep end of looking at data between sessions, looking at data between sessions with multiple drivers and doing comparisons live at the track. But as you said, this is a fairly recent thing, not just for you, but for everyone, but for you in particular, in that I think you're still going to have those early day experiences of looking at data and having that fresh perspective that'll be really good for the listeners to kind of hear, what's the entry point that most people have, whether it's the right one or not. And, now reflecting on that, what would you do kind of differently, right? And so maybe to kick things off, I'm going to ask a bit of a philosophical question to the group here, which is, why do you think we're so obsessed with timing?
Like lap timing?
Yeah. Because
Well-
it seems like it's such a core part of the track day, track people experience, right?
I think we're in a unique sort of community where our type of driving generally is in a competition sort of state. I think folks who like I've met a lot of folks who are like, I'm not too concerned with my lap time. I'll just go to the track and, try to have fun with the car or test out some new mods or whatever. But I think when we get into the headspace of competition, and especially time trials, autocross type competition, it becomes like an all-encompassing thing, big goal that we're trying to achieve. So I think with the obsession of data and numbers, maybe it's our, like, the last two brain cells we have in our male minds is like, yeah, let's go faster and faster and faster. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
The thing is, like, that is definitely true. Like, I've gone to many track days with both of you, and it gets in my head, right? Like, there's an expectation, right? Especially at a competition day, there's that expectation of like performing well, doing well, trying to beat yourself, trying to beat other people, right? That's all part of it. But honestly, like, I wish I could find a balance, because right now when I go to any track day, like Jay and I and Giuliano, a bunch of guys went to a track day at the end of the season. I had my friends them too. I was just trying to chase a time, right? At the end, I got it, but I wish I could separate a little bit of that and just enjoy just driving, just being out there, not worrying so much about a lap time, but going out there, having some fun. Yes, in competition, yes, we want to chase those tenths. We really want to push, but I think for all of us, we're competitors, right? So of course we're going to be obsessed with performance. We're going to be obsessed with our time. But for myself, like, I think I need to find a balance between having fun and not having my fun be tied to a particular lap time or my performance, but just having a good time. Like, I see my friends like Sean and Tim, and they have like Miatas, like really slow cars, like really old cars. They have like like a mini GP, like Elantras, Veloster, stuff like that. They put these crazy alignments on them. They like slide everywhere, front wheel drive drifts and stuff, and they're just out there having a blast, right? So, like Pat, like you said, we're like a little bit of a special breed where we have that competitive mindset, and we're trying to push, and we're trying to improve ourselves, improve the car, and maybe impress others as well, right? I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I do think you have a pretty good balance, though, Jay, with regards to, I think you and I were having a conversation maybe a year ago about like car selection and vehicle behavior. And you were telling me explicitly, like, I'd probably prefer a car like an M2. I don't know if this is still true, by the way. I'd probably prefer a car like an M2 that is a little bit more playful and fun, rather than something that's like uber planted like a Cayman or a 911. I'm sure you can have fun in whatever car you drive, but it definitely shows in the way that I see you drive on track. You do like to get the back end out a little bit, and it ends up being really functional for you. You still go really fast.
Yeah, I think, to go back to this data thing, I think, of course, it's really important. It actually helps me keeps me grounded, in the sense that if I didn't have feedback like that from my own data, I would be sliding way more. It's just the way, my driving style, right? And so I can kind of coach myself in that sense. I do get on the power really aggressively, and I do like cars that rotate very well. But yeah, I love that sort of character in a car. Yeah, like the Caymans, the Porsches they're just really, really planted, right? And then more front wheel drive cars are just kind of like,
He doesn't like to slide as much now, because I teased him to no end last year about how he was driving with way too much toe and losing so much corner exit.
Yeah, I drove my M2 with zero toe in the rear, and it was just like, tons and tons of oversteer everywhere. But it was fun.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I want to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier about, like, there's a little bit of the sharing aspect of laps and hero laps. And, I don't know if this resonates with you guys or not, right? But on the topic of just being out there to enjoy the lap versus improving and being able to capture the laps, it almost feels like to me sometimes when I put down a fast one, that if I didn't have telemetry running, or if I didn't record the lap, it's almost as if it didn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like here's my time, and it's like, oh, where's the proof?
Yeah.
And if someone shows you like Harry's lap timer, it's like, oh no, that's not real. That's not 10 hertz GPS.
Did you have a GPS or was it just your phone, bro?
Exactly, is it your
Like,
phone? Oh, you got a
yeah.
video, right? Yeah. But yes, no,
Yeah.
you're right. Like it's everybody wants proof, and everybody wants I guess I don't know. I think partly it's that you want to show others that, hey, I did this time. You can compare to others, right? Because that lap, really, if you didn't record it, it did happen. You know what happened, right? But I guess having the telemetry and having the video, it's kind of like, hey, everyone, take a look at this, right? Like G
Yeah.
Sun's lap at DDT, it's like, oh my gosh, like everyone look at this, right? It's like, whoa, so cool, So it's I think part of it is like we want to, no, not necessarily from a like bragging standpoint, maybe a little bit, but also just like we share.
Yeah.
There's definitely a
There's
little bit
definitely a
of
little
that.
bit of that,
Let's
but
be
we also
honest.
like, I guess amongst our friends, like we actually
Yeah.
encourage each other, right? Like in our team, for example, if someone
Yeah.
puts out a blazing fast time, like that's crazy, man, good job. Like I want to see the video, I want to see how you did it, and we can
Yeah.
discuss it, we can
How'd you do
talk
it?
about it, right? And then like you're so happy and eager to show us like, hey, like what could have been too, right? Like that one corner, five, ABC. Sorry, five? Yeah, five at a GP, right?
At
You lost
GP.
like, I don't
Yeah.
know, second half. We're all just laughing at you, but it's all in love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it
Yeah.
having the video and having telemetry is like you can share with your friends, you can share with the community, you can kind of, um, I guess, enjoy this experience together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I think that's right. Like it's always a double-edged sword, right? Because as you said, it's such a good tool for reviewing and get to, if you have the right mindset, a learning mindset, to get feedback from other people as to where you can improve from trusted sources. But on the other end, it's like with all social media, this is a key area where people like to kind of curate their garden of hero laps to kind of share with people and to flex a little bit. So I think that's always something that, for better or for worse, is a big motivator. But I think over time, you kind of get to a place, hopefully, that it's not the only thing that's fueling your ambition to improve.
Absolutely. I remember
Yeah.
one time we're at DDT and you were giving me some pointers, Jay, right? We're like last corner. It's like,
Yeah.
what is it, 12, 13? Like the little S? Is that 12, 13? I don't even know the corner numbers.
Depends on which map you look
Okay.
at. Some people call it 15, 16,
And I
17.
remember the
I don't
first thing
know.
you said to me, you're like, oh, if you don't get I think you even say it in your video, your DDT
Yeah.
track guide. You're like, oh, if you don't get a good exit out of this, like just abandon the lap. Do you remember that? You know what I'm saying? You don't get a good
Yeah.
thing. Just
If you're going
abandon the
for
lap.
ultimate lap time, it's an important. It's like that is like the longest straight in the track. Of course, it's going to be important.
I know,
Yeah.
I know.
However short it is.
Yeah, so you just see Jay go like really, really fast, and then he'll mess up a corner. He'll just like go really slow for the rest of it and try again. Yeah.
Yeah. Though I feel like nowadays, so that's like the open lapping mindset of like if you're trying to set a personal best, but in competition, that's not the right mindset to have. Like I think in competition, unless you're saving up your tires for one more lap afterwards, sure, you can kind of toss it out. But if it's like the final lap, like it's still worth giving it. And the lap that you mentioned at GP where I lost like a second on turn 5, that was a perfect example because I still purpled the entire lap. Right, the last sector just found a ridiculous amount of time. So in competition, don't throw away your laps. But if you try to go for the hero one on an open lapping day, then by all means, it's up to you. But yeah, let's kind of jump into what I want to call the beginner's guide to data analysis, right? So Jay, I'd be curious to kind of hear your experience of like when you first started collecting data.
Yeah.
How did you go about it, and what were some of the things that you were focused on at that time?
Yeah, honestly, like my first track day, I already had Harry's lap timer. I had it downloaded. I didn't have a 10 hertz GPS, but I was using it to film, and of course, again, it picks up like your min max speeds, your apex speeds, that sort of thing. So actually, I started with that my first day, and the telemetry was horrible. It was like the speeds were off. Like like with the video, it wasn't very good. That's probably because I didn't have a 10 hertz GPS, but I started with that, and then someone had recommended me get a Solo, so I got a Solo 2. Unfortunately, that doesn't track telemetry. It just it's more of a lap timer, right? You really need
So the
the
non-DL version.
non-DL, the
non-DL.
non-DL. So I
Yeah.
had that, and then I borrowed a friend's Solo 2 one time because mine was broken. They sent it in, and it had like this OBD2 thing and all these. I wasn't familiar with it at the time, but it was a data logger, right? So I didn't really know what that meant at the time. Used it for a few track days, and my friend Josh, his name's Josh, he kind of told me like, it's a data logger. It can pick up, your driver inputs, the speeds, where you're on track, all this cool stuff, right? And then I took a look at my data. I had no idea what it meant. There were so many charts, so many graphs. The only one I really understood was speed, right? But I mean, Harry's lap timer could do that too with the GPS, right? So I wanted to understand all this other stuff. So, I watched some YouTube videos, still quite confusing. So I reached out to B Squared actually. So Pat and Amando and his team, just try to learn a little bit more about like what is all this information. There's so much there, and the Race Studio 3 and Race Studio 2 and 3 software. It's not very user friendly. Like you click one thing and then now it all makes sense, but at the time you click one thing, it like changes a bunch of stuff, or it can get confusing at times. But
Mhm.
once I learned more from people who knew more than me, I bought a dash, so like the AIM MXG 1.2 dash for my Beamer. It's the same dash that the BMW race cars use, so it's like perfect fit finish, amazing, beautiful
You race
OEM. It's sick.
Just trying to get that GT4 look
Exactly,
right.
exactly. So nice. It has a GPS. It has a Smarty Cam. So now I can basically collect everything and analyze and process it and
Yeah.
come up with an action point, right? So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like from a Harry's lap timer. Oh, I'll sneak a Garmin in there as well. I got a Garmin before I experienced what a Solo 2 DL could do. Garmin is great. It has video as well, but I think the one downfall why I moved away from the Garmin versus the DL is that DL can track driver inputs as well, right? It can also track things like your RPM or your oil temps or your coolant temps, so you can even look at like the health of your car, right? There's a lot more that does, and I think the main thing is overlays. You can overlay with the AIM software. So let's say like Patrick drives a BRZ at S&P, and I drive it, and then somebody else drives it, and then maybe a professional drives it. We can overlay all of those to see where one person might be faster and why they're faster as well, right? So the Garmin is just video. It gives you those like action points, but I found that the Garmin, I think, doesn't take into account, like, let's say you go, your entry speed is much higher for one lap in a particular corner, but then in the second time your entry speeds are lower in that corner, but your exit speed is faster. It thinks that you can do both, where in some cases you can't. So those optimal times might not be possible, right? Versus the AIM, you can really take into account everything. And look at those data points either by themselves or overlaid.
Before we get too deep into the AIM analysis, because I definitely want to get there, but I want to make sure that we kind of talk about some of the early basics, right? Like we talked about Harry's and just some of the terminology that Jay's using, right? Like 10 hertz means using an external GPS attached to your phone so that it pings its location 10 times a second. Because with a standard cell phone, even now, I think all cell phones are still just outfitted with a 1 hertz GPS module, so it can only ping once a second. And so when you use something like Harry's, which, you know, personally, I think that's probably still the first tool that I would recommend people just to keep costs down, right? And you get an external GPS, it's like 100, $150. With 10 hertz, it becomes pretty usable. With 1 hertz, the track trace is just all over the place. And I think where the magic really starts to happen with the data analysis, right, is when you can start dissecting corner by corner. But with 1 hertz, it's just not going to be able to give you anything meaningful.
There is one more tool to add to the Harry's lap timer and the external GPS. And the last one would be an external like Bluetooth OBD reader that you pair to your lap timer via Bluetooth. And then you've got your external GPS also paired via Bluetooth. And then what you have in the end is sort of like a package quite similar to what you'd get out of an AIM. So you still have most of the major OBD or onboard diagnostic signals that your car is spitting out. So this can usually mean throttle, brake, and steering, which are your 3 inputs, pretty critical. And then their outputs, which are your lateral G, longitudinal G, yaw, several other factors that the car is like by standard supposed to be putting out. So you want to put together sort of like a cheaper version of an AIM, phone app, and make sure your phone is mounted properly. And then that'll just be your like little screen, and you can like, you shouldn't look at it all the time, but if you wanted to take a quick peek when you're on the straightaway, here's lap time, and you know that the data is reliable, and you're also getting all your vehicle inputs, so you can review that, not in the same app as AIM, but there are a lot of free tools like circuit tools that will allow you to review your data in a pretty robust way for not that much spending.
Yeah. It's so it is very robust, as you said, right, to piece it all together. So that's the phone app, the external GPS, a Bluetooth OBD, and then probably you'd want to add a GoPro to that, right?
For sure,
as well. And that's the nice thing about Harry's, is that it can, when you connect it to through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, I think it used to be Wi-Fi, but maybe they can do Bluetooth now. It would sync the recording of the laps to the timing loop trigger through the satellite, so it can sync it together. Now, the problem with piecing together a system like this is something always doesn't connect right when you start the lap. And I remember like the early days, like that was one of the biggest stresses, because like I said, like if it's not recording, it didn't happen, or at least that's what was going on in my mind. I had so many connectivity issues from time to time where like the GPS wouldn't connect to the phone or wouldn't pick up satellites. And that's like really where like the more all-inclusive ecosystem of like an AM like really shines, where like you don't really have to do anything, you just go and everything is like triggered automatically, right? There's no setup. This is kind of like a pain. But you know what I want to kind of unpack a little bit is when we think about the early days of first experiencing the benefits of data, what would you say was like the first aha moment of like, oh, this piece of data right here, mind blowing in terms of what that created, what opportunities that created for you, what realizations that created for you?
Yeah, I think the fact that I can overlay laps, not just my own. Like I know one time into SMP, just as an example, in the BRZ, it was OTA, SMP, long track. I asked Patrick for his data, and he sent it over to me, and I pulled it up. I asked another friend, Josh, who's a very fast driver. He also drives a BRZ. Asked him for his data.
Josh Chan,
yeah.
Shout out Josh Chan.
Yeah, I asked another friend who's really fast for his data, and I overlaid them all. I did a test day. I went out, and all I did was drive. Okay, just collecting data, my own laps, and then I overlaid that on top of all of their data, and it's really interesting to see the differences in everyone's driving, where I need to push a little bit more. Right, if I see all three driver is going much faster than me into turn one, then I know I can push harder, right? So when I'm actually in the car, I'm driving by feel. I'm not looking at the
Yeah.
speedometer. I'm not looking at the dash or the solo. That's afterwards. Like for example, turn one, like everybody is on power, right? Like you
Mhm.
lift a bit and then you're on power, right? For me, I lifted too early and then I got on power a little bit late. That's worth like half a second, right? And you can actually click from data point to data point and see like Josh was 0.2 seconds faster than you here. Patrick was 0.3 seconds faster than you here. Or maybe in this random corner, I am 0.2 seconds faster than them, right? So you can go from like corner entry to corner exit. But not only that, you can go, okay, if I get a really good exit here, like how does it affect my next corner? And how does corner one and two look together? So to answer your question, it's just being able to um, I could ask Patrick about it, and Patrick will tell me. He'll be like, I do these things through these corners, and sometimes as a driver, it's hard to understand and comprehend that in words. Sometimes for myself, right?
Yeah.
But to see it side by side, and to see exactly how much faster he's going and how he's doing it, his steering inputs, his throttle inputs, all that stuff. It just helps me learn very, very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. How can you be confident that that's not a matter of setup, right? Because let's say, I think for the slow corners, perhaps like, it's down to more of at least like entering the corner, right? Maybe exiting, it could be partly the setup as to how quickly you can get back on power. But certainly for like a fast corner, let's say like, as you said, turn one S&P, the setup of the car can be pretty important in terms of whether it's balanced to be able to get back on power, or maybe getting back on power too early is going to be too loose. So how do you kind of factor that in when taking a look at those overlays?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, you're not going to overlay an M2 to a BRZ, right? And
Mm.
so you find uh, people who may have similar cars, like Gen 1, Gen 2 BRZs, right? They're going to be somewhat similar, right? And we don't set them up outrageously different, right? Maybe a little bit of toe in the rear or zero toe, a little bit of toe out in the front, or maybe zero toe. Our camber settings are our camber settings. But not only that, um, not to get too technical, but you can look at other corners as well. So if say I'm struggling with turn one, but I'm pretty good at turn
Mm-hmm.
two and turn three and turn five or turn eight, just random, just using examples. You can look at like maybe how many G's the car is pulling, right? Like lateral acceleration, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
If the cars are doing, drastically different times, there's got to be a reason for that. Either it's a driver or setup or tire or something, right? But you can kind of gauge how different the cars are just by looking at, I would say, lateral acceleration. Like how many G's is this car pulling? Like how quickly is it going through the other corners? And if it's consistently similar in all other corners except say turn one, then maybe it's the driver, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What would you say,
You
Just
Patrick?
process of
Yeah.
elimination.
What would you
there.
say,
Well,
Patrick?
you just described, I don't know, my partner Amanda went through this with you in your training, but you described what we call the ruler technique, which is you plot the lateral G or your like cornering acceleration graph. And as Jay said, it'll peak between corners and say like, your top line is your left side corner. Your bottom line is like right-hand corners, and your middle is like you're not cornering, you're just going straight. So your car is going to start to generate different top max cornering forces for each corner. And if you were to take a ruler and try to line up all of the left corners and all of the right corners, you might have some that are like lingering. Maybe some corners just aren't that steep, but think about similar corners. So we were talking about Shannonville. So maybe turn 2, turn 3 are sort of similar. They're both right-hand corners. If you're making 1.5 G in turn 2, 1.5 G in turn 3, and let's say another similar right-hand corner could be like turn 8. Although it's a little bit bigger, you could still be generating the same amount of G. You're just staying there for longer. But what like one of your corners that are supposed to be similar don't have that much G? Is it an area where the driver has spun out before? Are they afraid of the corner? So you can get, you can make a lot of conclusions based on the very technique that Jay was just mentioning. So you take a ruler, see if you can draw a straight line between all of the peak cornering Gs, and also see if there is something that can be improved from the setup by doing the same, like moving the ruler down to right side corners or left side corners and seeing, okay, is the driver on all of the right side corners making consistent G? And then right side versus left side, does the car make more G generally in right turns or left turns? Is there something that we can change about the setup so that the car can still corner at like maximum G for both left and right turns? And this is definitely dependent on the track as well. All of our road courses here in Ontario are clockwise. So even on our race car, sometimes we have staggered camber from left to right, which does play a role in an 8-hour long race.
You guys do a staggered setup?
Yeah, I think at particularly Shannonville, because it's a lot of like hard right turns. Yeah. I think we have more, like slightly more camber on the driver left than we do on the right. And again, that's just because we're there for 8 hours, and that
16.
We're not trying to change the tires in between stints or whatever. We usually change them for the next day. So we really got to rely on keeping the tire temperature happy on that front corner, and all of that setup is the summation of what we learned from so many years of collecting and analyzing the data.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense, right? For a dedicated race car, like that's never going to see any like street driving to take advantage. But you're going to realign that thing between every race anyway. You might as well make it suitable, as suitable as possible for the track and run that asymmetrical alignment. Makes a ton of sense. Pat, what would you say, you know, when you first started looking at data, like the big aha moments for you in terms of unlocking performance? Was there anything that really stood out?
It's actually very similar to what Jay was mentioning about comparing to other drivers. So I didn't really get super deep into data analysis until my 2019 and 2020 years of competition in OTA. More particular in 2020, where I was competing against Daniel Kokar for the top spot in GT3.
That must have been tight.
Class name. Well, it didn't end up becoming tight because he had definitely like a better tire setup. He was on an AO52 and I was on like a stock size RS4. But I wanted to see how
you
close
calling him out
I
for
can
cheater
get.
tires?
Oh no, he definitely earned his speed. There's no way it was the tires, man. That dude can drive. But yeah, I just wanted to see how close I can push a package that in like on paper wasn't theoretically capable of the same things. And particularly for the corners which I was most scared of. So turn 1 at Shannonville, turn 5 at Shannonville, and turn 11, all fast corners. And I feel like that's where I was always losing the most time when I needed the most bravery. So I go into like my data and Daniel's data. We shared data a lot that season, and he's like, I'm flat here in turn 5. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do that. I know I can't just expect to stick, but knowing sort of where he starts to turn in, comparing it to my data, I know, okay, maybe if I lift a little bit before the same turn-in point, maybe I can achieve throttle duration for longer. For me, it's a lot of the comparison aspects, less so for setup, but it was just to convince myself that I can do some of the same inputs as other drivers if I was just brave enough. It told me what the car was capable of, and then all that's left was for me to execute.
Yeah. See, when I started looking at data in the early days, I wasn't as fortunate as you guys in terms of having, friends who'd be willing to share their data with me. Or I think more accurately is I didn't know as many people who were actually recording data that could be overlaid. And I myself, like I don't use an aim at this point. It's probably something that I want to get. But what I ended up doing was, quite literally just doing frame by frame analysis on my Harry's recordings with the 10 hertz GPS to kind of, because the biggest learning for me was I started looking at min speeds through a corner. And that was, as a singular metric, was probably the most impactful for me to kind of use as, as a measuring stick of, did I do this corner well, or could I have done it better? And part of that realization is really tied to the type of cars that we're all driving, which is like, an 86 momentum car. It is much easier to scrub speed than it is to build speed, right? So like, I think a lot of people misunderstand that, if I went into a corner, 2 or 3 kilometers slower than I could have, that's fine. I'll just make it up on the next straight, right? But to scrub off those 3 or 4 kilometers is very easy to do, right? By over braking, but to actually get that back, where like, the first bit of accelerating after a corner actually takes a little while to build up that speed, right? You get it more towards the end. Makes a huge difference through a corner over an average span, right? Like if you're 3 kilometers faster from corner entry all the way to the end of the straight after the corner, that's massive, right? And I think when I started like looking at my version of overlaying data was literally just going on YouTube, looking at footage from other drivers who have been, recorded their like CSCS final attack sessions or something like that. And I still remember like DDT is the track that I have spent the most time with, and it's the one that I feel comfortable like actually giving some pointers as to like, which corners, how do you optimize it? And the corner that data unveiled the most for me was turn 2, because like everyone has a different way of taking turn 2, right? And then I think over time we've all realized, well, you know what, like the fastest line is actually you go all the way out to the wall, and you kind of just like balance the car with as little braking as you can get away with, right, through the corner. And I only found that out by looking at, I think it was Michael Gardner's overlay and his like 370Z, 350Z, I can't remember. Yeah, and he was like going all the way out to the wall. I'm like, oh, I haven't seen anybody do that. And the next time I was out there, I gave it a shot. I was like, yeah, like min speeds are so much faster. It went from like a like low 90 to like most times if I don't get it over 100 min speed. And I was like, oh, that wasn't that great of a corner, but it was just like insane. The amount of information that I was just kind of looking at somebody take this other line, and then the only number that I could find that was easily transferable was just like, okay, what's their min speed through the corner? And I was like, okay, if they can do it in this setup, I'm like, I shouldn't be too far off. Gave it a shot. It was like huge. Really big difference.
Different car comparison still works for you, yeah.
Different car comparison. I think it was just like, I just loved the metric of min speed through a corner as like the thing that kind of is the bubbling up of a whole bunch of different things. Yeah. Right? Like you like to achieve that min speed, you kind of think about like how do I do that? Which makes it a little bit more complicated, but I think it is like a really easy to just a singular number that you can share with people that can really change their perspective of a corner. It's like, oh wow, like you can do that min speed. Okay, that means like there's a whole bunch of things that I can try to kind of get there, including the line, including your braking. And I think with that perspective, actually, it was like a really big break point in how I thought about the approach to a corner, especially with braking, because before that point, and then this is something that we could get away with 86s, which is like, I'm just going to stand on the brake and let ABS do its thing. Yeah. Right. And then after that point where I started getting fixated on this concept of maximizing min speeds, I started braking a lot less and braking a lot earlier, keeping the car balanced so that I know that I can get on throttle as soon as I can and to have the highest minimum speed through a corner as possible. Because a lot of times it's just like early days is like step on the brake, get the car slowed down and get back on throttle as fast as you can. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to over brake and the car is like a little unsettled, right? in terms of the weight transfer.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
That
what we're taught in like HPDE, right? Like you start
yeah
off with breaking a straight line release and then turn in.
yeah
It's great for people getting comfortable on track. But from what we've seen in data, using a little bit of brakes to give the front end a little bit more response is worth so much time on the track. And even for like turn two, I like how you describe that you're braking earlier and less, and
Yep.
prioritizing car balance over just raw braking pressure, getting the car slowed down, because that's such a critical corner on that track that I still, after driving it for the past 5 years, I still don't think I've really nailed down turn two. Really tough corner. Yeah.
Doesn't have enough braking references. We're basically looking for like cracks and weeds
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the side of the wall.
I look for the start of the curbing like way down low on the right. And I'm like, oh, there it is. And then I have to react to it. You almost have to like visualize it coming up to you, which I tell that a lot to my students. Like, okay, you saw it that last time. Just imagine it. It's hard. You're not going to get it done your first day.
Yeah.
DDT, you're not going to learn in your first like couple of years of driving to really master that track. Tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things like I really recall from this past season, Jay, was when we were at Mosport GP and you and Sean were driving the Elantra together, both collecting data, and you had the luxury of being able to, like, between sessions, just kind of review it together and see where each of you guys are able to find additional time. Can you kind of walk us through? Because like it's such short amount of time between sessions, right? Like, how do you prioritize what to look at? What's your kind of workflow to go through the data to find the lowest hanging fruit for additional lap time?
Yeah, so I guess the first step is collecting the data, right? So I went out, I drove my session. I had the luxury of driving the car the day before. This is my first time driving the car, GP, not my car. So I wanted to just do some lapping the day before. So collected a lot of data there. Then I drove it the next day, the first practice session, and then Sean drove it the second practice session. And then we had that little bit of time in between, right? So there is this really, really amazing feature on Race 3 where you look at it's like a time delta. I guess like this line would be the reference lap. So I would be the reference lap. And every single time it peaks, Sean's going faster. And every time it dips below the line, I'm going faster. If the lines are parallel, then we're going the same speed, right? Or we're going at a similar pace. So very quickly, I just click that button, look at my fastest 3 laps, Sean's fastest 3 laps. We overlay them, and we can see where Sean's faster, where I'm faster. So for myself, I was much faster in 4 and then 5 ABC, and he was able to gain a significant amount of time. And then for myself, I was over braking in turn 1. So maybe it was a fear thing, but I was, lifting and then braking too much. That's where I got most of my time. And then also turn 10, we found that I was braking in a straight line and then turning the car in, versus Sean was just trailing the car all the way to the apex, and then getting on power much earlier than I was, right? So, I mean, once you understand, I guess, how to use this tool, and you sort of set up what data points you want to look at and what's important to you, then it actually becomes very, very user friendly. So, each session we would have, one actionable point. I think 2 or 3 is maybe too much. Just one thing we want to do better, just one thing. And then once we did that, we look back at the data, like, did you apply what we talked about? If yes, okay, we can move on to something else. If no, then we can look at why, have a discussion, talk about what, not just the data, but what the driver feels in the car. Like, Sean's like, just brush the brake, get the front end settled, and then turn. The car won't really, like, it does understeer quite a lot when you just turn. So for myself, I felt like okay, I did that. I lifted early. Even though I lifted early, the car was balanced. I turned in. It was understeering. So then the next time I thought like, okay, I need to lift early, but also I need to brake. So then I overbrake the car. But Sean explained to me what he's feeling in the car. It's like, no, you can go faster. All you need to do is brush the brake, get a little bit more weight on the front so you can turn the car in. And once you do that, you're fine. So I was on a limit that I thought was the limit. I was on a limit, but that's not the limit, if you know what I mean. So you can
Yep.
use data to sort of look at, okay, I felt like that's all the car can give, but in reality, it's my driver input as well, right? So it's about getting better as a driver, but also finding the fastest limit, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
us two together, not just the data, but having communication, talking about what you actually feel in the car, and then looking at the data to see like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like what you feel is reflective in the data. And then from there, we encourage each other to push where we need to push.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not just about like, hey, Sean, you're going 10 kilometers faster than me here, or Jay, I'm going 10 kilometers faster than you here. Just do it. It's not about that. It's not just like, just go faster. There's got to be a path to gaining that speed in a safe way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good point, right? Where perhaps there's a little bit of the danger of just looking at the data by itself, because we know that it's not in some cases not the whole picture, right? Like in this situation, like you and Sean are fairly comparable drivers in your experiences, right? And that like what one can do, the other can probably replicate in a short amount of time. But if you have two drivers of very different skill levels, right? How do we make sure that there's some guardrails so that people don't, blindly look at the data and just like, okay, like this person's demonstrated as possible, just go out and do it, right? It always reminds me of like last week or when we were discussing like when you're instructing someone and they're waiting for you to give you the braking cues, and when you don't tell them, they're like, all right, I guess I just keep going, right? So like let me give you an example, right? Turn 2 at GP. A lot of people are worried about that one. And tons of time there, but a lot of cars that are set up to go fast, like that's where you're balancing the car almost on a knife edge sometimes, right? And the way that we probably all drive it is like, yes, we're turning left, but our mind is most active in actually giving it a little counter steer, right? We're almost always like giving it almost like a little bit of a nudge to the right whenever we feel the tail is starting to get a little light, right? And that's not something that translates that well in the data, and that maybe you're actually not applying it. Of course, we're not applying net steering to the right, but our active mentality is basically alert and always ready to give it that, right? And that probably enables us to be able to get to such a high speed through turn 2. How do you communicate that through data, or communicate to another driver looking at data is like, hey, like I'm spending 99% of my, conscious mental energy and kind of for that seat of the pants feel of I need to throw in counter steer. And that's what enables that corner to be coming through in the data as that speed.
The thing is like those corners are pretty high commitment corners, right? The thing is I had trouble in turn 2 because my entry speeds were too low. And then if your entry speeds are too low in 2 and you suddenly get on the power, like the weight shift to the rear in a front wheel drive car, if you shift too much weight to the front, you're taking weight off the front. And so you start to understeer. Versus if I just went faster entering the corner and I get on the power more gradually, then I'll reduce understeer, right? So I think turn 2 is a tough corner to talk about because, like I said, it's a pretty high commitment corner, right? It's like blind over crest. You can, if you wash, like you're washing, or if the tail comes out, you got to quickly react, right? And it's also kind of hard to, like I said, to work up to because of if you enter too slow and you get on the power too quickly, you're going to have a different result than if you go in faster and carry the speed through the corner, right? So I think that's where that is even more powerful, because you can show someone and prove to someone that, hey, if you commit to this, it's possible. Rather than sometimes there's that little bit of a gap. Like, I'll give you another example. Like, we have a really high downforce TT Cup car with MTech, and there's this gap where the car has its mechanical grip, and then there's this gap where if you go just a bit faster, it won't work. You have to go significantly faster to access that arrow. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yep.
that is really, really helpful in terms of data to show, like, hey, you can go faster, but you have to go this much faster. And so it's up to, I mean, we're talking with B squared here, right? It is the brains, you have some brains, but there is that bravery component as well, right? Especially for a corner like turn two, or, turn four, right? Some cars go flat, but part of it is that bravery, right? So that data
Yeah.
kind of reassures you in a sense that, especially if someone else has done it and they show you on data that, hey, this is possible, that data gives you some reassurance that, hey, this is possible. But of course, we need to possess some of the skill to actually do it, right? So whether you can correct
Yeah.
for that oversteer quickly, where to expect the oversteer or the understeer, and of course, our driver inputs are super important as well. So turn two,
Yeah.
I think, is just a really tough corner to try to unpack.
Yeah.
But at least, again, data can help support your decision making on the track, right? And then also, of course, it's not the only piece of the puzzle. Driving by feel is
Yeah.
also really important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like ironic that, like, with these tough corners, the changes that you need to make in your inputs are not big changes that are perhaps super noticeable in the data, right? Because it's like all these like minute micro adjustments to enable you to kind of be on the edge and keep it stable there. But on this topic of bravery, right? Like, how do we de-risk some of that, though? Is the right answer just go for a ride along with someone who's able to have a higher limit, and just so that you have that physical experience of what that's like? Or do you find, like, has that been beneficial for you in the past, or do you find that it just it's completely different being in the driver's seat versus the passenger seat?
No, I think it's definitely helpful, but I think the main thing is that the Sean Jason sort of example is great because, like you said, we have similar driving capabilities, right? We have similar car control. So if you take someone who's brand new and you put them, next to a really fast driver, that's not going to end well, right? That's why we say at OTA we go 60% in the student's car. We don't full send it, because the first thing they're going to do is just hop in and try to go just as fast as you did, right? So if we're talking about data, I would assume that the driver, it's not their first time on track. They've been on track multiple times. If they're getting to this data level, they're trying to chase seconds or tenths or see how they can improve as a driver. So they've been on track before. So the gap between the drivers, if we're comparing the two, I don't think should be too big. And also, not only that, you don't have to compare to somebody else. You can compare to your own laps, right? To see where you may have gone faster yourself, where your inputs may have been a little bit better. Where potentially you can look at something like wheel speed, right? Front, left, rear, the individual wheel speed, to see maybe, oh, I was going faster here, but I wasn't understeering. Or maybe I was going slower here and I was understeering. And so you can find these little Easter eggs with your own data to figure out like where you can improve. But also, like I said, I think there needs to be a similar skill between the people that are comparing data, so that it can be more applicable. Not that that's not helpful for a new driver, it is, but I wouldn't look at something like speed right off the bat. I would look at something like steering inputs. Like, hey, look at your steering inputs; they're really all over the place, right? And look how smooth mine are. Or I would look up something like throttle application. Like, look how smooth my throttle application is versus you're just getting on and off the gas, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It just really depends what your goal is for that particular session.
Yeah. And speaking of beginners, then, question for the both of you: when is the right time to start introducing data analysis in the arc of, a new driver getting acclimatized? Is it after a few track days? Is it applicable right from the beginning? What would you say is the right time to make that introduction?
Well, there are drivers who have coached with data from the very beginning of their sort of racing journey, and it was helpful to them, but they also knew what they were getting into, regards to like regimented coaching, database training. That's what they were seeking out. So they had it in their mind, to be comfortable with looking at data and understanding how long it was going to take to understand each of the individual data points that you can extract from a vehicle. Now, is this going to be applicable to everybody? I don't think so, mainly because you have to be in the right headspace to accept data and all of its benefits and all of the work required to extract those benefits. I think the driving hobby has probably some of the highest number of variables out of any other hobby I've ever experienced. When you get into a car on a track, you have all these different factors, yourself, how much sleep you got, tire pressure, whatever, fuel you put in the car, your tune, the car itself, alignment, a million different factors. And it can lead to a lot of overwhelm, especially when a lot of the drivers around you can see them like taking and releasing pressure. Oh, what's that guy doing? Oh, what is that device that's on that other driver's screen? What are all of these things? And then when you get into the car and you're thinking about all these variables, you're like, I wouldn't recommend throwing data into the mix for somebody who is still getting acclimated to the hobby. So if you have enough headspace to approach data and make time for it, perfect. If you feel like the hobby is still overwhelming, you're just testing the waters, you're probably going to have more fun just getting the seat time and enjoying the car. So I always say, like, give it a shot. You don't need to do data analysis to enjoy the track hobby. But for those in the competitive, if you are of somebody with a competitive mindset, it's a no-brainer almost to actually take the time to look at your data and see how you can improve. Otherwise, those others who are looking at their data and comparing with each other, we've listed so many ways just in this podcast of how it's been helpful to all of us to get faster. And maybe we'll toot our own horns here. I think between the three of us, we've all like really proven ourselves over the past few years that, okay, maybe these guys are sort of onto something. They're going pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different levels to this, and we kind of touched upon it, right? You don't need the best solo 2DL. You can just even, just filming with a GoPro is, I mean, it's not telemetry, but it's something, right? And so really what we're all looking for is just some feedback, right? Like if you're in the car by yourself and you're fairly new and you're driving, we always have people asking us like, hey, like, can you mind hopping in with me? Like, can I get some feedback, right? And so this is just another form of feedback, right? And I think it is not just applicable to competition, although it's most helpful in that sense, right? But I just don't think that somebody who's not in competition is going to be studying their data, right? I spend, like hours preparing for OTA for each event, right? Looking at data, watching videos. Like Jason, I slept with your Garmin, when we were at Calabogie learning a new track, right? I fell asleep with it like this on me, right? Jisung came in, let's go,
Just
what's this
like
guy doing, you know?
learning through osmosis. Yeah, just
Exactly.
in a trance.
Exactly. But I think everyone can benefit from it. It's just how much do you want to put into to learning a new thing and to your own learning, right? Just getting better in general. It takes work, right? It takes studying. It takes reaching out to people who know more than you do. Like I had to reach out to B Square, to Mando, to learn all this stuff, and now I can apply it, right? It can be like
Yeah.
daunting at first for sure, but I don't think most people are just out there to have a good time, right? You don't need telemetry to have a good time, but
Mhm.
to improve and to get good feedback, to see everything, because really data don't lie, right? It doesn't lie to you.
Yeah.
You are putting the inputs in, right? You are carrying the speed or not carrying the
Yeah.
speed. You're pulling the
Yeah.
G's, right? So you can look back at it and get better.
Yeah. It's so speaking of data doesn't lie and being in the right mindset to take this kind of feedback. I guess this is more of a question for Patrick, but have you ever dealt with students who, it's almost like they put up a bit of a defense or a wall after seeing the data or getting the feedback, that kind of triggers a bit of a fight response to start coming up with some excuses as to why it's not applicable to them, or like, oh, like it doesn't really capture the whole picture. Any pushbacks from students?
To this point, I'm not the only coach on B Squared. Maybe Amando has in the past, but personally, I'm usually using, at least for my training method, I'm usually using the driver's own data. The things that I look for initially would be like consistency, so we can target specific corners to work on. It's pretty hard to push back on the data if it says, turn one, your braking and throttle look pretty consistent. You're doing it generally at about the same point, but like turn three, dude, like your steering, the way that you're turning in the car, look at even just the geographical plot. The data doesn't lie. You have to be more aware of how much steering angle you give and try to give a similar steering path every time. Will that same path that you work on be the fastest? No, but if you're not consistent first, how are we going to be able to find what the most ideal path for you would be? So, in terms of like pushback, usually, if I do get pushback, it's like, oh, I don't know if my alignment will allow me to corner that way, especially when you're doing like a car to car, like different cars, different drivers comparison. People are usually like, oh, that guy has this sway bar and this wing, which is why he can do it. And I'm usually like, well, yeah, he has a sway bar in the wing, but also your ambient temperature is more ideal than theirs. So your tires might have better capability. There's excuse, just give it a shot. What's the biggest risk, especially if it's not like a big, like scary fast corner? We have almost the slight benefit to have a lot of technical road courses in Ontario where you can test things and experiment without risk. So that also breaks any excuses we would get from another driver to say like, oh, I don't know if I can. Why don't you go try? The risk is pretty low. Here are the tracks.
Yeah. And so what does the typical intake for you guys look like? Let's say like somebody comes in to B Square and they're interested in doing some data analysis work. What's that first session like?
Well, it depends on sort of the package. Right now we have 3 options. We might be modifying that for next year, but generally a driver is like, hey, I have this data set from a previous day at TMP. I'm about to go into OTA competition next year or whatever. I'm going to go to the track another day and I'd like to see where I can go faster. So we'll take their data, video if they have it. We'll analyze it on our own before meeting with the driver to sort of present to them, okay, here are the corners that you need to target for consistency. Here's a technique that you can try to do based on your video. Maybe move the car over to the left side a little bit more before turning in so you have a wider arc. These are some of the tips that we give drivers based on the data we receive. and
Yeah.
we can present it to them, as I said, either via video or report. So we have like a printed out, like a PDF of like very specific pieces of their data, like why their braking plot is not the most ideal for some corner. Maybe
just some casual reading before bed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we get all those like screenshots of data and like screenshots of their video saying, hey, maybe like position your car differently.
Right.
And then if they don't want the analysis done for them and they want to learn, we do also offer like just privatized consult sessions. So we recently had a karting family come to us and say, hey, like we want to learn how to do the data analysis yourself, so that when we go on like different races, either within the country or if we go race in the US, they understand the process of what that takes. So we don't have our online course. We used to host like a classroom of like a weekly online course. It was a 6-week course, but now we're just doing that privately while we're starting to build up our portfolio of products a little bit more. But yeah, a private consult, join us for a call for like an hour. We'll show you how to do like basic data analysis. And then for every other meeting, we're just going to increase the technicality of it. So you have a toolbox of different things you can look at for every time you go to the track.
Nice. And so I'm usually really obsessed when like learning about like really deep areas of expertise to understand what kind of patterns might exist. So when it comes to working with new students, is there like, 9 times out of 10, the first piece of advice is always X, Y, and Z? Is there like a very common pattern to the biggest unlocks of performance for people who are at that stage of just getting interested in data?
There are 2 that I most commonly see, which is consistency. So some drivers are pretty timid versus the complete opposite, which are drivers who are like very hasty to go really fast. So they're like braking the latest, over driving the car. And then the timid drivers are under driving the car. But in both cases, you can sort of see where on the track they're more comfortable and where they're like really inconsistent. So we really tried to nail down consistency first. And then the next one I have the most like frequent work, I think, with drivers is hard braking and a slow release of the brake pedal. A lot of drivers will like slowly reach the peak. I try to tell them it's not supposed to be like a stab, but you are to get to 100% braking a lot faster than you are to get to 0% braking. It should almost be like a step function and then a slow decay of how much brake pressure you have. And it's hard to convey that. Sometimes I show the driver, here's an example plot of what this should look like. So you can visualize your foot physically doing brake and then slow decay. Yeah, the consistency and braking are the biggest ones that I've found drivers to find the most benefit. That once they get those 2 things down, they're all encompassed by your vision capabilities. Braking as well, because you're still using like a brake reference. And consistency, if you're moving your eyes in the same way every time, you can do pretty repeatable laps. So telling the story about their vision is what I find the most out of data, and then we can correct for that.
Right. Isn't that so interesting that like, and I think I've heard this from many different sources, right? Where when you get to the pointy end of driver capability, it all comes down to braking, right? And from like an outsider's perspective, everyone's like, oh, it's got to be something to do with like, the steering, the bravery, the throttle application. But it's like, no, it's like literally, and not even just braking in general, it's the release of the brake, as you said. That's like where all the magic happens at the margins, right?
Yes. Beginner or like experienced driver, release is so important. Yeah.
Jay, when would you say you felt, or I guess what led up to you feeling like it was the right time to go get, professional expertise in reviewing your data and to improve?
Yeah. So I think for me, I'm really just interested in this, right? Um,
Mm,
I want to see where I can improve. I want to see where I can get better, and um, I wanted like a concrete way to um, give myself feedback and also get feedback from others, right? And so I think sitting in a car with somebody who's like way faster than me before, I was just kind of blown away. I think my first GP sitting passenger was with Chris P, and he was my instructor. And I'm like, hey man, can I go with you? And I just had no understanding of how can I do that. Like that's just he's just so much better than me in so many ways, right? And so I started doing a little bit more reading, a little bit more research, and then looking at the understanding of kind of like a friction circle, right? Like a traction circle, right? And try how to maximize your traction circle. You can tell somebody like, hey, to go really fast, you want to constantly be on the tire's edge of grip, right? You want to be pulling the maximum amount of G's all the time, forward, back, side to side. But really, what data is breaking down that traction circle, right? You have like your lateral G's, your longitudinal G's. You have obviously all the things that make up being on the edge of that traction circle, maximizing grip wherever you are. And so
yeah.
there's no in between. It's kind of like, where do you go from there? Where do you go from understanding that, hey, you go fastest when you're at the edge of the grip, right? How do you then break all those small things down? Um, yes, you could have like a professional coach all the time, but that's really expensive, right? How do you hire, a professional coach to teach you all these things all the time to feel in the car what's going on? So the next logical step for me was like, okay, I want to get better. I need some really, really good feedback, and that's where I reached out to B Squared. I got the necessary data logging equipment, and then I guess the rest is history. And I'm still learning, right? I think I still have a lot more to learn, and a lot more to work on as a driver. So then having this feedback is so important to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And when, it's kind of discussed, like part of it is the data, part of it is the driver experience and getting comfortable with applying the data. And then I would say like a third part is how does the data translate into car setup and what you need to, like what kind of changes that you should actually make to the vehicle to apply that, right? Part of it is the human application of the learning, and part of it is then also the changes. So after doing all this data analysis and training in terms of interpreting that data, what were the most obvious changes to your car setup that kind of came as an outpouring of going through this process?
So I'd actually even take that completely separate than the driver, right? Like it's car and driver,
Yeah.
right? So I use the data, and if the car is consistently understeering, you can see that in the data. You can see it in like wheel speed sensors and yaw rates and stuff like that. And so you can make adjustments to, let's say, your dampers, right? And so you can make the adjustments, and then you can collect more data and see if that improved it. Like, are you pulling more G's? Is the car oversteering now or more? Is it understeering more? Are you able to carry more speed? So it actually is very helpful to car setup because you can see the changes that you've made and see how it's affecting how the car behaves. And then you take your own subjective experience of that, because we all have, car balance preferences or setup preferences. But the data can also not only improve you, but it also improves the car. So it's not that the data helps me. So I would say the data can help me make changes, but then I got to go and verify that data again and make sure that it's actually doing what it's intended to be. So every time I collect data, I have a question in mind. Is my car healthy?
Mm.
Okay, I'm going to log oil pressure and oil temps and transmission temps, or I want to change my dampers. I'm going to play around with it. Is this actually helping? Because what I found, and another aha moment, is what feels fast to me might not necessarily be actually faster, right? So sometimes like setting your
Yeah,
suspension
like
up.
getting the tail out,
Yeah, exactly.
you know,
Like,
on
oh,
every single
I'm getting
corner,
such good
drifting
rotation.
through it.
You know, I'm getting amazing rotation. Like, look how I can get on the power. Like, yeah, the throttle chart looks like, wow, you're on throttle all the time. Like, you're going so hard on the throttle, 100% throttle here, but the car is sliding, right? It's completely sideways. So yeah, I think it's like another aha moment. It's like, okay, what is the data actually saying? Like, are my changes making me go faster? Right? And so, for example, like softening my high speed compression all the way down to like all the way down at, let's say, a track at DDT or SMP, right? The car feels a little floaty and a little bit softer, right? But it's absorbing the bumps, and I'm
You
able to
take them
get on power
curves.
faster or whatever, right? Or another thing, early on in my, I guess, driving, I would set my dampers, like there'd be super on compression, on low speed compression. It'd be really stiff because it felt like, whoa, like I can really load up the car, and the feeling of being skittish was like, whoa, I'm really on the limit, right? But really, that wasn't the right setup, right? So after I softened my dampers a little bit, then you look at the data, like, oh wow, like this is actually better. Like the tire's digging a little bit more. That's just an example, right? So that's, how I use data to help confirm, if you will, that my changes to the car are actually helping. And the thing is, if you do too much at one time, if I change my tire pressures, I change my damping, I change my sway bar, I change all these things at one time, it'll be too many changes, right? So one thing at a time, you look at the data, you drive it, you analyze it, and then at the end you have a conclusion, right? Like something you need to do, something you need to act on. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a process, man. It's a process. It's not just like collecting one set of data, like everything. It's like, no, every time you come in with a question or like a hypothesis or something like that, if you want to call it that, you actually collect the
Yeah.
data, you analyze, you clean it, you pull the data that is relevant to your question, you analyze it, and then you have an application.
Hey,
Yep.
can I
Yeah.
drop a quick PSA on the topic of dampers real quick?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
If you're in Ontario and you're driving all of our small, tight, bumpy tracks, stop making your car so stiff. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You cannot put the power down. Stop making your cars darn stiff. You don't need to. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's like a big learning that most car enthusiasts undergo, right? When they start to go serious at the track, you're just like, well, you start to realize that taking legal shortcuts on track is probably the best way to go in some cases. Like at DDT, you just like try to jump all the curves, and the only way that you can do that successfully and still be able to get back on power is like, yeah, your suspension has to do what suspension does, which is absorb
bumps.
the impact without affecting, the balance of the vehicle too harshly, right? And so a lot of times softer is better, and it's really, nowadays I feel like you basically want to set up your car as soft as it can go on compression, at least, so that you don't give up. And the countering effect is that you don't want to give up too much of the transitions, right? Like if you're finding it too difficult to, when you're turning left to then go turn right because you've softened it too much, then that's probably the time to start bumping it up. But yeah, in most cases, softer is better. And I think that's why like a lot of us who are so serious about putting down those fast times have looked into three-way suspension to get that high-speed compression, is like purely for that basis. Like the only reason why you're paying for, the 2000 set of coilovers up to like $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 is to just be able to hit those curves real hard on that high-speed compression and just really soften that up. But yeah, I think we've been chatting a lot about how data is like a pretty significant advantage when it comes to finding additional lap time. And like one of the things that kind of, just to start rumors, dropped in the first episode was, should data analysis and telemetry be considered a performance improvement when it comes to competition, right? And of course, we're kind of talking about in reference to Ontario Time Attack, where we try to equalize the competitive landscape between cars and between different modifications by having this relative scoring system. So yeah, question to you guys is, does it feel like telemetry should be something that incurs performance improvement?
I'm going to say no, because the magic of data comes a lot outside of the track. You're doing your analysis at home, or like in between sessions. It's not something that makes your car faster. So I think it's just homework. You don't get extra points on the test for doing your homework. You get points on the test for completing the test. Yeah, that's sort of my perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, we still have to drive the lap, right? The data logger doesn't drive the lap for us. And when we're actually in the car, like I said earlier, we don't look at the dash. We don't look at the solo. In many, I used to have the predictive lap timer on, but I found that actually made it worse for me. You know, like I'll see like 0.2 red, 1 green, 0.5 red, 4 green. You know, it's just almost more
you
distracting.
see a lot of green dots line up. That's when you start screwing up.
Exactly. It's almost more distracting, right? But like Patrick said, the magic happens afterwards. You're not, looking at, again, those timing devices as you're driving. They're, again, to me, more distracting than anything, right? So we can't be penalizing people for promoting good behaviors and, getting better, right? Like using tools to get better, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? Like, I'm kind of in the middle on this, right? And the thing that I would say is, I think it's hard to ignore that there is a fairly material cost component to doing this at the level that we've been talking about, right? And so part of equalizing the competitive landscape, I think, is also thinking about how do you make it approachable from like a financial perspective for all people, right? And I agree with you, it is homework, but as you've kind of demonstrated this year at GP, like being able to actually do it between sessions and immediately use that in the next session, especially with like limited runs, right? Like that it feels like it's getting to the point where there's a measurable impact, there's a cost component to doing it. It does promote good behavior, no disagreements there. But is it in the spirit of fairness, right? And this is just to have the conversation, to really unpack, like, where do we feel like there could be potential hangups?
That is true, though. Like,
no, don't do this, Patrick.
Why are brakes free? Brakes have a measurable impact. They're a safety item for sure. But in the OTA series on Ontario Time Attack, you can do as many brake upgrades you want to your car without receiving any penalty for it. So now I'm like, does that mean
he's just trying to change the topic?
Well, no. Like I'm just trying to think, because it does make sense. Like the data, like especially in the most like devious way that Jason's been doing it between sessions, like and even myself, I had Miguel Lopez, GTV competitor with the WRX. He hired me for a day at DDT, the very last event. And we were finding time between sessions, and he just kept on going faster and faster throughout the day. So it is almost like a benefit. Like, where did this guy get all that speed all of a sudden? The data is giving it to him for sure.
And just to, I guess, give a proxy, right? Like, you think about sports like tennis, where the players can't even get coaching between games.
I didn't know that.
when they're in a match, right? Like, it's illegal for them to get any sort of coaching from their coaches.
Wow.
Because they have to be the ones to determine, like, okay, where, because, like, of course, if you have a third party observer, they can kind of help you dissect the game and give you an advantage. But the spirit and the culture of that sport is that, you know, it has to come from that individual in terms of where they find
Wow.
the
The penalized
advantage.
data in tennis. That's crazy.
No, no, that's not data. That's coaching, right? That's like, you know, it's a little different than this. Like I'm
They still
coaching.
use video to do that?
Uh-huh.
Video is data?
I mean, like if you want to put it that way, it is an advantage. Like I would be slower potentially without the data than with the data, right? And
Yeah.
so, but that is, I think we're trying to find, I guess OTA's thing is like it's all about the driver, right? That's why these performance and
Yep.
performance points help us to try to find the fastest driver, right? And so I think it is an advantage, of course, but it's also the driver that needs to actually do it, right? And so if we're looking for the best driver, the best lap, um, obviously there's lots of factors, right? Like, are we going to start to penalize like this person did a lapping day beforehand, or like this person, got coaching from another person on another day? I think it's that time frame when you're in the car, when you're doing that one lap, that one perfect lap, all as competitors at that time. I think that is the spirit of time attack, right? If we start getting
Yep.
too crazy, we're going to start to penalize ridiculous things, right? But yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that lap,
Yeah. And
I'm improving as I go, yes, but my best lap is the only one that counts, and it's
yeah.
me as a driver at that point in that competition. That one lap, that one perfect lap is what I'm competing with all my peers, right? So that's the
Yep.
way I see it.
Jason,
Yeah.
how much would you pip data logger? How much
Yeah,
is
I
it worth
think if
to
it
you?
were to get a pip, I think it'd probably be like 1 pip.
Thanks.
That's kind of my view. I'm still on the fence about it because one of the things that I really believe in is the pip system should also be used as a tool to promote the behaviors that we want to see, right? Which is what we've been talking about, right? Like using data, if it is an advantage, but it's a very positive behavior for the sport and for this organization, I think that can be a 0 pip, right? So it's the same thing as you said with the brakes. It's a safety item. It allows drivers to be more consistent. It saves money over time as well, right? So I think that's like a very positive thing. If people were penalized for it, then people would take unnecessary risks and act in a perverse manner, right? And so, because we want to promote the use of data and for people to keep learning, even if it is a performance and improvement, I think in my mind, in the spirit of kind of growing the community, it feels okay to be free.
You touched on a good point there about it actually saving money. Like
Yeah.
you get, if you have your data, you're collecting data on your car, and you've also added like, the Nankang CRS tires. It's like commonly known today as some of the grippiest tires you can buy, sure. But if you do your data comparison, you're comparing to somebody else with like RS4s, and you're not making the same grip, then you probably shouldn't buy another set of like expensive Nankang CRS.
That's true.
You probably want to go to like another tire where you want to learn the limits of yourself a little bit more before spending so much money on all the expensive stuff. So
For sure.
in the spirit of like accessible motorsports competition, grassroots level, data is proven to save people money for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we've kind of talked a lot about the current state of data, at least at a grassroots level, right? Like we're not, I mean, Patrick, you guys with the endurance racing, you guys have like a pretty intense setup with streaming and stuff like that. I think that's like worthy of a discussion for another time to think about, like, how do you do those like more advanced setups? But where do you think, at the accessible grassroots level, data analysis is moving toward? What's kind of on the horizon in terms of like new technologies and new methodologies?
Automation, for sure. I think there are already readily available tools from, I think Driver 61 does it, maybe Coach Dave, Delta. They're like in the sim racing space, automated data analysis is already readily available, and for what is relatively like low cost. It's pretty applicable to those settings because a lot of the times the environments in the games are like standardized, lesser but still kind of applicable to real life racing. Although, unless the AI has the entirety of all the factors that exist, like both on the car and environmental, it's also sort of harder to do that because, you don't have that many sensors on a real life car that you have access to from like a video game in comparison. But we were talking earlier about the Garmin Catalyst, which does use the camera to track the driver's input paths, and then it coaches the driver via the paths they've been taking and measures on its own where it thinks you can be faster. So on the horizon, a lot of the AI tools have just become so much more accessible. So whether or not that's like applicable for everybody, who knows? At this point, I really wish a tool like the Garmin would be able to take in OBD from the vehicle and give higher resolution feedback to the driver. But of course, there are there can be some, like, maybe I'm guessing legal ramifications to collecting vehicle data in that manner. I'm not sure how all of that works because
I think it's just
AI
a matter of time, right?
Yeah.
Before, like, that seems like the most logical next step for Catalyst to actually get like CAN level input or at least OBD level input, right? But I guess, like, to your point of automation, and Jay already alluded to this as one of the limitations to the Catalyst, which, by the way, I still think is an amazing device. I highly recommend it to anyone because if you're just getting started, like, being able to review between sessions is just so powerful, right? But one thing I noticed this year as I was competing with the GTI and using the Catalyst is that the predicted optimums were so far off of what the car was able to do. And I think part of that issue is, like, the easiest way to diagnose is if you have a car that doesn't have the ability to put down one full hot lap without the tires degrading, you're going to have crazy optimals, because that's what happened with the GTI, where I didn't have enough tire to be able to do a full lap because they would just overheat because they were just rolling over like crazy. But throughout the day with traffic and doing, like, practice sessions here and there, I put in hot corners that all stitched together, became great. But once it comes to competition, you can't actually do that because you go 10 tenths on every corner. By the, last quarter of the lap, you have no tire left. And so you'll always be underperforming what that was able to do in isolation, right? So I think the thing with automation is, as long as you can understand the scope of how it is giving you those recommendations, then by all means. But a lot of that comes down to, like, actually understanding, how is it coming up with these recommendations?
Which is where I think personalized driver coaching and race engineering is still such a crucial part, even at the professional levels of racing. There are tools that are starting to enter the professional space. Even like OEMs are developing their own tools for motorsport specific data analysis. That's all I'm going to say on that topic. But the fact is, racing teams at every level of racing, whether grassroots going up to the pros in any form of driving, essentially, we're all still athletes in some sort of way, and we need that personal coaching and somebody who is on site to understand, okay, these are the conditions. This is what the driver is going through. The driver is giving you feedback. You can't talk to an AI with your voice to tell them how the car felt, and then they'll give you back some sort of command. So there is still such a need, I think, for the human to be able to coach a driver
at least for
performance. At least for now. Yeah.
At least for now.
Yeah. Whether I get replaced with an AI, sure. But I hope I'll be fast enough then that I won't need some more AI coaching. We'll see.
We've been talking about this for quite a while now. Like, we're running up on 2 hours. So we'll try to wrap things up hopefully in the next 5 minutes. And Jay, I know you listened to the first pilot episode. So one of the things that we're gonna do recurring segment on the show is the Modest Dream Garage. You get $200,000. You get 3 cars, and those are the only 3 cars you can drive, right? So you really got to think about it there as to how it's going to fit into your life. What are the cars that you are going to choose?
So yeah, I feel like you guys did it completely wrong last time. You guys mentioned your cars,
Okay.
but you did not account for so many things. Like how much you're gonna rice out each one of those. Like the 200K budget
That's why we're
alone.
saying
about
just the cars, just the cars.
No, but like you have to budget the light bar on the Tacoma, you got the skid plate, all that stuff that all costs
The
money. You know what I'm
aim
saying?
dash.
Exactly, aim dash. You got to get the carbon fiber, all of that. Like, so talk to me, man. Does that 200K include that?
Just
Like,
cars, okay? We'll make it simple. Just the base cars. Everything else is free, okay?
No,
Just
I
get the
don't
base
want.
cars.
Everything else is free. I can modify it as much as I possibly want.
Sure, within reason.
Beautiful. So, okay, now we've clarified that. Okay, I'm going to describe the cars too. Okay, of course, I'm going to get a BMW M2 competition. Okay, I'm going to basically do what I did to it. Toss in a Drexler in that bad boy. Some Zebulon Aero. Boom.
Jeez.
That's the fun track car. I can drive it to. It's the best drive to track, drive home car, in my opinion. It's fun. It slides around. It's not super planted. You can have power oversteer on demand. That's the fun car. The thing is, like, okay, taking another thing into consideration, like Team Pardo has a trailer, MTech has a trailer, my friend Jack has a trailer that I have access to, right? So technically, I don't need a tow vehicle because I can just, I have all these friends like, hey, is this cheating? Is this cheating? And I'm like, hey,
no, you're fine.
my friends can tow my car to the track. Okay, so I would have again the M2. I would have either an E92 M3 or F80 M3 manual as a daily. That'd be sweet.
Ridiculous.
Okay, I would say F80. I would say F80 M4 because I can share parts like with my track car. If I need like a transmission or I need like pads or tires, whatever, like anything goes wrong, I can just change parts, So anyways, that is a daily. And then so here's the thing, like my wife has a Tesla, okay? So like she's in my life. So we can take the Tesla or we can take that, like, the SUV that she's going to buy later on, okay?
He's justifying another sports car.
Right? So then I would either get an RF Miata, or if they fix this stupid oil starvation in the Gen 2s, if there's a fix for it, I would actually get a Gen 2 BRZ.
What would you use the BRZ for? You already have the arrive and drive in the M2.
No, but like sometimes you don't want to bully people too hard on open lapping days. You know what I'm saying? Like you go to a day, like you're hitting traffic everywhere, F80, M3, perfect daily, all that's so fun. But then if you want to just, they're very different cars. Like BRZ is like, high entry speeds and you just try to carry as much speed as possible. M2, like if you go in too fast, you're gonna give it all up on the second half of the corner. You need to actually go in a little bit slower, and then you obviously has a lot more power than the BRZ, so you kind of lean a little bit more on that. It's a lot more fun, but obviously the BRZ is very sharp. I also enjoy that driving experience as well. So I didn't even think I spent 200K there. BRZ is 30K, right? F80 used ones like 50K, that's 80K, and then the M2 is what, new? I mean, used ones are like 60K now, right? So I'll use the rest of that 40,000.
So you did come up with a lot of money for rice then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I only had 200K, I would just get the M2. I would put all $200,000 in it and save $2,000 for like a little zip around.
What does a $200,000 M2 even look like? I don't even know. Like custom laid carbon pieces by hand from some
basically his car
in Italy.
Now is his M2. Dude, do you have the fastest M2 like road course car in the country?
Well, yeah, I think so. But other guys have like, there's ones that get towed to the track that are fully caged that are faster. Like, have you guys seen I call it like a catfish. It's like a gigantic fish. It's like the Super Aero orange M2 at CSR.
The orange one.
I've seen this one. Yeah.
Yeah, like those ones are faster, right? But like, Danny, he was at
At OTA.
OTA for no kink DDT, right? So yeah, those ones are faster. Like, but I think I have the fastest street car for sure, if you can call it a street car.
We'll just have to convince Danny to play his car and just drive to it.
Yeah. It's fully caged with all the aero. It's crazy. There's no back windscreen on that thing. It's carbon fiber.
I see. So he's got the camera and everything and the screen on the inside
I don't
of the
even
car.
think he has that. Like the car. Yeah, I guess it gets pushed.
There's no way there's anyone who's gonna come up behind him. It's going too fast.
Exactly.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, seeing as this is like the second last day of 2023, tomorrow's New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear if you guys have what are the goals for 2024? Briefly.
Don't blow up the
first.
BRZ after we install the super. That's it. Like, we're gonna do Numi. That's still gonna happen, but like put in that super, put out some banger laps, and not have the car in a tow truck this year. I think that would be great.
You might need some of the axles from Jason's trackside used axle shop.
Oh, don't say that. Yeah, I got a lot of spares from you.
You should bring at least one spare with you.
I will.
There's a way to do it, to slam it in without needing to adjust the alignment. So I've got it down to a T now.
Yo, you gotta show me that. I saw you guys doing that at DDT.
I can teach you the ways. It's easy. Right.
Yeah,
what about you, Jay?
I don't know. I think I'm still sort of deciding what I want to do with the M2. If I want to put some aero on it, I have a diff coming. But I think it's just I just want to have fun with the M2 because unfortunately, like this year, like I barely drove it. Like OTA, I did one lap, right, and then CFCS in the warm up, I blew a damper, and then transmission.
Man, just one of those years.
No, then my transmission went. I didn't get a new transmission, right? And then the BRZ, I blew up the motor of the BRZ. Like it's, and then
don't touch my car. Don't touch my car.
I broke so many cars. Like I broke the RSX, right? Technically, I broke it. I broke the throttle cable.
That's true. You retired it.
Technically, I blew the diff at the second day.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Like, you retired it 2 times.
I retired all my cars and other people's cars this year, right? But fortunately, I had such good friends, right? Like I drove everybody's cars. Like I drove the huge long list of cars. Like I competed in the Elantra as well. Like I drove the RSX, the TSX, the TT. I had a Cayman for a while. I had my other friend's M2. I drove so many cool cars this year. So I'm really thankful for that. Honestly, to answer your question, I think this year I want to focus on just building more community, really. And encouraging other people to do Ontario Time Attack. And I think I might take a step back. I might do 1 or 2 events or do all the lapping days. I actually hope to talk to Kevin about maybe volunteering, giving back where I can, maybe do some Hanson days, take my brother out a little bit more, do some more lapping days, just stuff like that, right? And then maybe I'll compete a little bit here and there. I think CTAC, I might do like track mod with my M2. It just depends. Also depends where your build is at, right, Jay? Like we can sort of decide together.
That's my goal. I just want to get it running. I'm hoping to do at least a handful of events. Yeah, I'm optimistic.
I'm optimistic as well.
Hold on. Which build are we talking here? K
Turbo
car.
Yeah, Turbo FRS. Hoping to do a few events.
Both of your answers included 0 wheel-to-wheel racing, and that makes me a little bit sad.
Oh, well, we might show up, maybe we'll rent some seats from MTech for a week and just flex on everyone in the Super Dog car or something like that. We'll be out there. Regardless, we'll be out there. I think if I'm not driving, I'm going to try to go to the events and just like create some content, film some documentaries.
True, yeah.
Make everybody look good, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Get more people into LD, man. It's like I feel like
that's where it's at. That's where the vibe is at.
Wheel to wheel in Ontario. Just that little bit more. Yeah.
The thing is, like, hey, all you listeners, my dream is this. My dream is we get Jay, Patrick, get the newbie guys. If you own an 8.6 or BRZ, whatever, first or second gen, we get 10 guys. We start with 10, okay? Just trusted guys. Giuliano, get out there. Eugene, I want all of you guys out there. Everyone with an 8.6. We rent TMP or some other track for like 3 or 4 hours. It's like $3,000 for 3-4 hours. And we wheel-to-wheel race our 8.6.
Oh my God.
Or
Spec
that's my dream.
series.
That's my dream. Or all of us do Lucky Dog, and we create some sort of like 8-6 subcategory, right? That'd be amazing. That'd be so much fun. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And on that
Spec
note,
86.
actually, we're gonna be giving away Patrick and Jason's car. Okay. All you have to do, we're gonna give away his Turbo 86.
Okay.
We're giving away Patrick's car as well, and even my BRZ. The only thing is, you have to be very simple. The 999th viewer or listener of this podcast, and you take home all 3 cars.
Yes.
Yeah, that is not the case. I wish it could be. You probably don't want these cars anyway. They're all racing junk. Well, on that note, let's wrap it up here. I hope you guys have a wonderful new year.
Yeah.
If you made it all the way to the end of this one, it's been a long one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to help us out, definitely hit the like button, add a question or a comment. And give us a review on Spotify if you're listening there. Oh, one thing we did forget to do, and I think maybe we'll save it for the next podcast, which is we want to jumpstart a Q&A. And the way that we're going to do it is we already have some questions in the hopper from some of our listeners, so thank you for that. What you want to do is just go to our latest YouTube video and of the podcast and just drop a comment with any question. And what we'll do is we'll go back to the previous episode comment section and then discuss them in the podcast when we record them live. So with that, thanks for joining us. Happy New Year. We'll see you guys in 2024.